friend. Welcome to Romans chapter 11, day 3. I would love to know what you are learning about God, what you learned from today's passage. Let's begin by reading this passage, and I'd love to chat about it just a little bit. Here we go. Romans chapter 11, verse 17. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches. If you are, remember it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. Then you will say, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. That is true. They were broken off because of their unbelief, but you stand fast through faith. So do not become proud, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. Note then the kindness and the severity of God. Severity toward those who have fallen, but God's kindness to you, provided you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. And even they, if they do not continue in their unbelief, they will be grafted in, for God has the power to graft them in again. For if you were cut from what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these, the natural branches, be grafted back into their own olive tree? Okay, well, friends, what an interesting passage, huh? We really do have to put on our first century ancient Near East glasses. We really need to put on our Old Testament glasses here, don't we? And certainly we need to just take a peek and understand, where were we yesterday? What is Paul talking about? How do we understand this? How do we interpret what Paul is saying? So yesterday, let's just take a peek back at yesterday. Here's what I had for the main point. God has not rejected his people, but he has allowed them to experience failure in a way that will bring reconciliation with the world and also lead to Israel's desire for God. All right, Paul has been talking about the current situation of the people of Israel, his fellow Jews. And we can tell Paul longs for them, right? He's made it abundantly clear that he longs for them. He hopes that they too will believe and desire God through Jesus. All right, so that was the main point. But then the second part, beginning in verse 13, we noted yesterday, now I am speaking to you Gentiles. And he began and we said, okay, we're going to hold off a little bit. This clearly belongs to the passage tomorrow, which is today, right? So verses 13 through 24 really are one section. And we see that yesterday Paul used this imagery of dough offered as the first fruits. All right, he's pointing back to the Old Testament. The Jews would have understood this, what it meant to be a first fruit, to be, how does Paul say it? If the dough offered as first fruits is holy, so is the whole lump. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. So this first fruit points back to what one of the cross references is Numbers 15, 18 through 21. And then Paul leads right into what this olive tree imagery, which is what we have today. This is all about olive tree imagery, and we need to understand, what is the olive tree? And here, the olive tree clearly represents the children of God, the people of God, right? And I love how God throughout Scripture utilizes very physical things to to teach us spiritual lessons. And Paul utilizes that here. What a good teacher. We're so visual, aren't you? I am a very, very visual person. And so this speaks to me. I can picture what Paul is talking about. So again, what does the olive tree represent? It represents God's children. But then we have the natural branches and we have the grafted in branches. All right, we have the natural branches, which Paul says here in verse 17 were broken off. And then we have these wild olive shoot branches that are grafted in. So these natural branches clearly speak to the Jews, the people of Israel, who what? They reject God. They do not believe. They are broken off. Paul makes abundantly clear. Why? Because of their unbelief. And then these wild olive shoot branches, which are grafted into the olive tree, clearly Paul is speaking about the Gentiles. And this is who he's talking to in this paragraph. Look, you were wild olive shoots who, out of the kindness of God's heart and your belief, your faith, you have been grafted into this beautiful olive tree representing the children of God. I did look up olive tree in I put that in my keyword column, and here's what my Bible dictionary has to say about it. A common tree in the Mediterranean world used for its fruit and especially for production of oil. Figuratively, it usually represents beauty or God's blessing, and that is the case here. It represents God's blessing. It represents being the children of God, right? I love that. I love that. All right, there's many, many cross references today. I highly recommend looking those up. For branches, there's Jeremiah 11:16, Psalm 52:8, John 15:2, and I'll read that one here in just a moment. All right, so one more time, what does the olive tree represent? God's children, the branches, the natural branches, the Jews, the wild olive shoots, or the branches that are grafted into the olive tree. This is the Gentiles. But what is the point to the Gentiles? Like, why did Paul call them out yesterday, saying, now I am speaking to you Gentiles? What is his point here? Well, we have a series of imperative verbs. These are, this isn't something, this is like a command, right? There were 4. Do not be arrogant toward the branches. Do not be arrogant toward the natural branches, the Jews. Do not become proud because you've been grafted in. Note then the kindness and the severity of God. God's severity towards those who have fallen, but God's kindness to you, provided you continue in his kindness. And fear, that actually is to be anxious or afraid. All right, so often Scripture says, do not fear. What is the one thing we are to fear? Fear God, right? Fear God, respect him, respect his power. What did I want to say about that? Fear what has happened to the Jews, to the natural branches whom God has loved. He has allowed them to be broken off. All right. So here's this warning to the Gentiles. Here's the warning to those who have been grafted in to the olive tree. And what else do I want to say about that? Basically, here's how I put it. It's a warning, and Paul is saying, number one, remember who you were. Remember who you were. One of the cross references was Ephesians 2:12. Remember that you were at that time separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, alienated from that olive tree, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope without God in the world. All right? Remember who you were. You were poor and needy, and you had no hope in this world. And then also remember who supports you. Remember this rich, this rich, nourishing salvation history. God's salvation history that began with the Jews. Remember who you are tied into, right? I love that. And then don't be arrogant, proud, but note the kindness and severity of God and fear. Stand firm in the faith. So John 15:2, who can say it better than Jesus, right? Jesus said, look, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit. All right, so there's that imperative verb, fear. Every branch that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Oh, friends, let us be grafted in. How do we do that? By believing, right? By believing. Application for today. I went directly to, all right, Carmen, number 1, humility check. A humility check. Paul makes loud and clear to the Gentiles, look, do not be arrogant. Don't be boasting over your achievement, all right? This is God's grace to you. Everything about being his child is his grace. So humility check. Don't be arrogant. Don't be proud. All right, 2, I think there's a call here for a belief check and standing fast in faith. What am I putting my hope in today? Does my hope stand firm in Jesus? And am I valuing this beautiful salvation history, God's beautiful salvation history through the people of Israel? Am I valuing his word that begins in the Old Testament all the way through Jesus? And then number 3, once again, I think there's reason for a unity check. Am I unified? Am I at one with this olive tree, with God himself? Is my heart and mind unified with his? Am I at one with the others? Am I reconciled with everyone who is a part of this olive tree? All right. Oh, I could go on because I learned a few things about God. What time is it? You know what? I think I'm going to end it there. We do learn some beautiful things about who God is, but we can always cover that perhaps tomorrow or in our wrap-up time. Friends, let's take this lesson today and apply it. Let's apply God's warning. Let's remember who we were before we knew Jesus, before we had received his grace. And then let's remember the one who supports us today with humble hearts, with hearts standing firm in faith and unity with Christ and one another.